Hey guys, this is Fate over at Diablo3StrategyGuide.com, and one of the most common mistakes I see by people are basically sorting through the auction house and selecting items with high DPS. And this is good, usually, but there's a lot of little intricacies about DPS that people don't realize, especially with the use of offhands. So for the wizard, that would be the Source and the Witch Doctor, the Mojo. And I'm going to go into those in a little bit of detail, as well as go over some of the special situations where you may actually want kind of the really slow attacking two-handers. Okay, so in this scenario we're going to be looking at two different weapons, the one-handed mace and the one-handed dagger. And so they both have identical DPSs, 1100, and I'm going to first kind of go over how that number is calculated. So the first thing they're going to do is they're going to take the 655 and average it with the 1179. And so this number for the mace ends up being 917. So that is the average number here. So the next thing they do to get to this number is they simply multiply the 917 by the 1.2. Simple enough. And so let's take a look at the dagger. 412 to 1054. So the first thing they're going to do there is average it, which is 733. And so this number right here would be the damage that you're doing per attack, essentially. And so then, of course, they'll do the exact same thing. They'll multiply this by the 1.5 number to end up with 1100 DPS. Simple. So which one is better? Most people looking at the auction house would say they're equal, but in fact the dagger is much, much better. And this is because of the offhand mechanics. Offhands add a raw amount of damage. So in this case, we're looking at a fairly typical offhand. I would personally recommend something a little bit higher in damage if you're in Act 2 or Act 3 in Inferno. But this is a decent one, assuming you have good stats on it. So it's 100 to 300 damage. And so they do a very similar thing here, where you average it and you end up with 200. And so where is this 200 number added? Well, it's actually added to this number right here. So in the case of here, you would end up with 1117 and 933. And then what happens? Well, then you actually multiply this number by that. And because relatively this number grew much higher and it has a higher attacks per second, once you multiply it out, you end up with 1400 for your dagger and 1340 for your mace. Meaning the dagger is the much superior choice in this calculation. So when does this figure in? Well, it figures in when you're searching for items. Items like the mace with the slower inherent attack speed will always end up showing up higher on the search results. This means that you should certainly take that into account and perhaps look for some very underpriced daggers for people performing the exact same queries when they don't know exactly what they're doing. Where else is it applicable? Well, it's actually applicable for a lot of rings and amulets, and so these will give you the +2 damage metrics, plus the minimum damage, as well as the thing that you'll see that's like +20 to 39 damage. And you can perform a very similar calculation for those, including the average damage raised. And those on average will just certainly help you more for higher attack speed weapons like the dagger. Alright, so the last thing I'm going to go over are kind of some special situations where you actually want lower attack speed on your weapon. And so usually these are very build based. So for example, for the wizard it would be the arcane orb build. For the witch doctor it could be if you're running something very mana intensive such as the zombie bears or fire bats build, but without vision quest or something like that. And so you don't have a ton of mana regen, and so your overall damage output is most affected by your arcane power or your mana and not your attack speed. So in these scenarios you don't even want to be running a one-hand weapon with an offhand. You actually want to be running a slow two-handed weapon, because these will do overall the most damage per attack, and so you want to do those because your damage is limited not by your attack speed. And so in these scenarios you should be looking on the auction house for the slowest weapons you can, and you should actually try to avoid weapons with additional attack speed. So things like the two-handed mace, which has the slowest attack speed of any of the two-handers at 0.9 attacks per second, is really the ideal weapon for something like an arcane orb-based build. Things like attack speed help to improve the attack animations and the kiting, but they don't help to improve your overall damage output in these cases. Alright, so thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys learned something about DPS and what you should look for in weapons, especially for the Wizard and the Witch Doctor. Please check us out at www.diablo3strategyguide.com, where we have both premium and free content for you guys. Thanks for watching.